We've already covered two hobbies of the salaryman trifecta, mahjong and horse racing, so today we get to turn to the Western gamer's nemesis as of recent years, pachinko. This week's game is Fever Sankyo Koushiki Pachinko collection for WonderSwan. Koushiki means official, which is your hint that this is a simulation of actual 90s era pachinko machines from the pachinko giant Sankyo. This collection was developed and published by Beck, which we coincidentally covered on an episode about a horse race betting calculator. What a wild ride. Pachinko is a mechanical game that combines elements of pinball and slot machines, most often used to gamble. You pay up front for a bucket of little metal balls, the currency with which pachinko is played, sit in front of a machine of your choice, and dump your balls into its ball reservoir. The machine has a few knobs and levers to control the speed at which your balls are launched from the tub onto a sort of pinball table looking board with a bunch of little pegs and bumpers on it. Hitting certain specific elements may cause you to get a tiny payout of single digits of balls, depending on the element, or you can aim for a ball-sized hole at the bottom center of the board. Getting a ball to enter that hole will start a digital slot machine in the middle of the board. It's very important to understand that the result of the slot machine is predetermined by a random number generator with specific pre-programmed odds, and you're really watching an animation play out, but don't actually have any bearing on the result of the slot machine. Getting 3 of the same symbol on that slot machine will enter a jackpot mode. While you're in jackpot mode, a new larger hole opens up at the bottom of the board, and each ball you successfully land inside will cause a large payout of balls to drop into your tub of winnings. After the jackpot mode ends, most machines enter a state called kakuhen, or probability change. This is meant to entice players to keep playing even after completing a hard-earned jackpot, as the slot machine will multiply the odds for certain jackpots on the slot machine significantly, making the possibility of consecutive jackpots far likelier. This is commonly called fever in the industry, thanks to Sankyo's invention of the kakuhen mechanic with the release of Fever Challenge 2 in 1991. Sankyo owns the trademark for the word, and as such, only their pachinko machines can use the word to describe a consecutive jackpot state. You may recall from a previous episode that gambling is illegal in Japan, so before we go back to this specific game, I do want to explain the two ways in which pachinko circumvents the Japanese definition of gambling. First, the Japanese definition of gambling is very strict about not being able to gamble for money. You can, however, use the balls as a currency and then exchange those balls for various prizes. Honestly, this is not too different from how redemption games operate in Western arcades. You play a game, get some amount of tickets, and then trade those tickets for what is likely a worse rate than had you used cash to buy that prize outright. However, with pachinko, there is a small counter right next to the pachinko parlor where you can trade certain prizes you got from the pachinko parlor for cash. So what happens in most parlors is that starting at a certain level, you can trade your balls for small pieces of gold, and that's what those counters buy from you in exchange for cash or occasionally gift cards to nearby supermarkets. As long as that counter doesn't appear to be connected to the owners of the pachinko parlor, the authorities can't really do anything about it. In the past, when I've explained this to a lot of friends, many of them have expressed that this suddenly cleared up a lot of confusion surrounding the Pokemon Game Center, so hopefully that helped you out too. Alright, second, there are enough tells on the machine to make it considered a game of skill, not purely a game of chance. Contrary to what many believe, shooting the ball isn't actually the skill being tested by pachinko machines, but rather being able to read a machine and tell how close it is to paying out. Pachinko machines are heavily regulated. They must abide by certain jackpot payout rates, and some information must be completely open and visible to anyone standing in front of the machine. The tops of machines have a digital readout display listing a ton of stats about how long it's been since the last jackpot, and while I don't really understand the details well enough to explain it to you now, and especially in a brief amount of time, people who know the regulations in and out can get a good sense of what machines are the likeliest to pay out soon. If probability math isn't your strength, then no worries. Generally, there are some visual cues on the board itself to let you know what state a machine is in, but they are subtle enough to only be noticeable if you're sitting in front of the machine and not from any further distance. This is why pachinko magazines and walkthrough books exist with pages and pages of probability math and detailed explanations of every light pattern used on the board or graphic variation used in the slot machine. Each of these clues is one more tool on your belt to spotting a machine that will inevitably cash up soon. Now that that's out of the way, let's dig into Fever Sankyo Koushiki Pachinko collection for WonderSwan. As I previously mentioned, Sankyo was a big deal in the pachinko industry, and they invented some of the mechanics that are now mainstays of digital pachinko machines throughout the 80s and 90s. Fever was the name of their very first pachinko machine back in 1980, and it became the name of their flagship series of pachinko machines over time. Fever Sankyo Koushiki Pachinko Collection is actually a series of pachinko compilations released on both the original PlayStation and the WonderSwan. Only one was released for the WonderSwan, and it was a loose handheld adaptation of the first PlayStation compilation. 2 of the 4 machines from the PlayStation version are here on the WonderSwan. CR Fever Casino RX from August of 1999, and CR Fever Zeus SX from February of 1999. One of the sad things about the transition to a grayscale system like the WonderSwan is that the background art for both of these machines was lost in translation, as keeping it would likely have made the board too hard to read outside of direct light. For a gambling apparatus whose main attraction is sensory overload, the WonderSwan adaptation of these machines failed to deliver and would probably better be appreciated on the original PlayStation compilation. It doesn't help that neither of these machines were particularly exciting to begin with. These aren't based on any licensed properties at all, they're all original, but also really bland. CR Fever Casino RX is a generic casino-themed board that wouldn't be out of place in Las Vegas, and no one is really clamoring to play it again in 2018. CR Fever Zeus SX, on the other hand, is a space combat-themed board with a small but dedicated fanbase that pops up from time to time on pachinko message boards, spreading the good news about pachinko museums that have a machine on display for a limited time. One good thing I can say about this compilation is the assortment of modes available to you as a player. Walkthrough mode is the pachinko equivalent of a fighting game training mode, fused together with an interactive version of the pachinko guidebooks I mentioned earlier. Not only can you play on the machine as you would in a parlor, but you can watch any animation on the machine to pick apart what the various tells are, or put the machine in a specific state to simulate an exact scenario you've got in mind. Simulation mode lets you input a ton of parameters pertaining to a specific machine and run a quick statistical analysis on up to 13 hours of simulated gameplay, even going as far as simulating the patterns observed at parlors near stations, in shopping streets, or in quieter areas, and with varying opening hour schedules. It's quite impressive, really. Beginner's mode is not a gameplay mode per se, but it is a rather extensive text FAQ for the basics of pachinko and how to explain common pachinko machine issues to pachinko parlor employees for people who get really anxious when the unexpected strikes. This is kind of a missed opportunity because every single entry could have been demoed inside the game instead of being told to you via text. And then there's Hall Simulation mode, which is honestly just an odd choice for the fourth menu option. In this mode, you get to play the life of a sad man who can't do anything other than sleep and play pachinko until he's played enough to redeem every single part of his broken up friend Drumkun and piece him back together. I honestly have no idea what Drumkun is. Your sad salaryman's talking robot friend, perhaps? The fact of the matter is, this would be a pretty commendable handheld pachinko game if it was on a system with color graphics. The machine selection is underwhelming in this version, but had it been in color, it might have sold well enough to warrant one of the sequels be ported to WonderSwan, and those fared much better in the machine selection department.